at the League of Conservation Voters, and by our own Beth Ahearn, Director of Government Affairs here at MCV. Chess, you want to go to the next slide? There they are, and then you can keep going. My name is Kathleen Meal. I am the Director of Policy and Partnerships at Maine Conservation Voters, Maine Conservation Alliance. Our organizations work to protect Maine's environment and our democracy by building diverse coalitions, influencing public policy, holding politicians accountable, and winning elections. Next slide. A few technical notes for today's event. You are all muted, but we do want to hear from you. You can send questions to me, Kathleen, through the chat as they occur to you. I'll keep track of those and we'll ask them of Tiernan and Beth during the Q&A at the end. If you have any technical difficulties during today's program, you can message Francesca Gundrum also through the chat, and she can help you out. This event is being recorded and the video will be posted on our website later this afternoon, where you can also find recordings of all of our previous Lunch and Learns. Thank you all for joining us. Tiernan and Beth, I will turn it over to you. And Chess, you can go to the next slide. And probably even the next one.
Thank you, Kathleen. I just want to say, I'm just so honored that Tiernan's here with us. She really is a rock star on the federal level, and she's fabulous. So I just had to say that before she starts talking. Thank you, Tiernan.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry, I was having a little bit of trouble getting off mute. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you for your leadership. It's really great I love Maine. I'll just say that right off the bat. So it's really exciting to get to be with all of you today. Kudos to everyone for your leadership, your support of MCV, and it's just great to get to be with you. Of course, it goes without saying, congratulations to all of us on getting rid of the most anti-environmental, pro-polluter president we've ever had. I think probably like all of you, I keep feeling waves of relief, of gratitude, of optimism about what it means going forward for our health, our economy, our democracy, our climate, and so much more. So I'm glad to just get to share a few thoughts on what this all means going forward. Of course, I should also note I'm really excited that Jared Golden is going to be returning, and definitely that Shelley Pingree is going to continue her long-time leadership. Personally, I know I'm really disappointed that Sarah Gideon is not going to be coming to the US Senate, because I think she would have been such an unwavering champion in the Senate. So that's disappointing. But if you see this slide, I think this really captures the excitement that I feel. Part of what makes me so excited is that Joe Biden is the presidential candidate, now the president-elect, who had the most ambitious climate plan in history, who also campaigned more on climate than any presidential nominee in history, and then received the most votes of any presidential candidate in history. It's also, I think, worth noting that thanks to many of you, he only got stronger on climate and environmental justice over the course of both the primary and the general. And he really did make climate a particularly strong part of his closing argument. He actually released new ads on climate in the final days of the campaign. He's repeatedly reminded the world that he's going to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, both on social media, and it has come up, I believe, with all of his conversations with world leaders. And he and Vice President-elect Harris both talked about it in their victory speeches. And we're really happy to see that the climate and environmental justice parts of the Build Back Better plan that came out this summer are already on the transition website. They've named the agency review teams. There's lots and lots of climate experts. So much to be excited about. So if we can go to the next slide. Chess, do you mind going to the next slide? Thank you. So I think it's also really encouraging that even though there was so many crises happening in this country, obviously the coronavirus pandemic is just horrifying, the economy, racial injustice. At the same time, concerns about climate change have continued, and the focus on it has continued as people face the growing impacts in their everyday lives. And I think people really get that the many crises that we face, whether the pandemic, racism, economic inequality to the climate crisis, they're all interrelated, and that the solutions can address them together. So we did see, though, in terms of like this continuing to be a big priority and focus in the campaigns. Exit polls showed that a record number of voters across the political spectrum said that climate change is a serious problem and actually that the government should invest more in clean energy. It was actually 72% in a Fox News poll. So clearly public opinion has really shifted, and it definitely played a very big role in the debates this fall. You can see, on this graphic, the Washington Post called it going from back burner issue to a central issue. We, of course, also saw many anti-environmental candidates pivot away from their climate denial, and then some really did successfully mislead voters about their real records on climate, environment, health more broadly. So if we can go to the next slide. So I want to just sort of talk about what this means going forward. There's no sugarcoating that when it comes to the congressional elections, it didn't go the way that we wanted. And we had made so much progress with Senate Democrats who were really prepared to go very big on climate with a majority right away in 2021. Of course, all eyes are on Georgia. Definitely people can contribute to both Warnock and Ossoff on the Give Green website, which we do in partnership with Next Gen America and NRDC Action Fund. But it's clear having Majority Leader McConnell versus Majority Leader Schumer would be really disappointing. So again, all eyes on that January 5th, those two runoffs. It is disappointing, again, that candidates like Sarah Gideon, but also Steve Bullock in Maine, or Teresa Greenfield in Iowa, Barbara Bollier in Kansas, who would have been the first female physician in the Senate. It's disappointing that they lost. At the same time, there are going to be some great new senators. So thank you to any of you who may have supported them. People like Ben Ray Lujan in New Mexico, Mark Kelly in Arizona, and John Hickenlooper in Colorado. So I think a lot of people know this, but the worst case scenarios that we're looking at is 48-52. A couple of these slides are from a couple days ago. So Cal Cunningham did concede in North Carolina. So 48-52 is worst case. We could be at 50-50, and then Vice President Harris would be a tiebreaker if that were to arise. That's of course really important, both for who controls the Senate is very important, both for legislation, but of course for the nominations as well. I'll come back to that in a second. Jess, if we can go to the next slide. I should also note that, regardless of what happens this year and next year, there's going to be a big focus on the Senate because of the 2022 elections. So there are going to be open seats in places like Pennsylvania and North Carolina that are swing states. There are, potentially some vulnerable incumbents in my home state of Ohio, like Rob Portman or maybe Marco Rubio in Florida. And then, of course, there are people like Senator Collins and Senator Romney who have supported climate action in the past. And so we hope that they would do that going forward. If we can go to the next slide and talk about the House for a second. I'm sure people have seen there's been a lot of discussion about sort of some infighting and sort of finger pointing, both at pollsters, but also between the moderates and the progressives. That's because the Democrats were widely expected to pick up 5 to 10 seats. And instead they're going to lose, I think at least that many. They'll probably be somewhere between like 222, maybe get more into the mid 20s. Obviously at that point, each vote makes a difference and there's still a few outstanding. It's definitely unfortunate to have a smaller majority. It's also disappointing that we really lost some rising stars when it came to the environment. People like Xochitl Torres Small in New Mexico, who was actually attacked for being too close to LCV and too good on the environment, or Joe Cunningham in South Carolina, who worked with Jared Golden. He really led efforts on the Great American Outdoors Act, which against all odds was this massive conservation win that was signed into law by Trump this summer. So definitely disappointing to lose some real allies and champions, but the Democrats do still have the majority. Pelosi is still the most pro-environment speaker we've ever had. And there are new and returning members who ran on public health, clean energy, climate change, environmental justice, and they are ready to go to the mat. I should note, there was even Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, was talking about how, I think he actually went so far as to guarantee that the Republicans would flip the House in 2022. So we definitely need to be mindful of having the back of our friends, especially in tougher districts. But I will say, just to back up for a second, I think because some of the polling clearly ended up being wrong, but looked so good. I think we all let ourselves not just sort of hope, but almost, I think for me, like come into election day kind of expecting by the end the best case scenario of having that trifecta. But if someone had told me a year ago, or even right after the 2018 elections, like we're going to beat Trump, we're going to defend the majority in the House, even if it's smaller, and we're going to pick up at least one seat in the Senate, I think we'd all be feeling pretty good. So just, I think, important to have that perspective. So let's talk a little bit about what this means going forward for federal progress. If we want to go to the next slide, that would be great. So again, we had been really focused on going really big, especially on climate progress with a trifecta, both with every bit of executive action we could muster, and then very ambitious legislation that likely would have gone through the budget reconciliation process, or potentially if the Democrats had gotten rid of the filibuster. I think and so we were expecting to do that sort of, if that opportunity presented itself with Democrats. That even if it's 50-50, Joe Manchin has already made clear in no way is he going to support expanding the size of the Supreme Court. He's not going to support getting rid of the filibuster. So legislating is going to be tough, even under the best of circumstances. But there is, I think people know this, the Biden administration has a tremendous amount of executive authority, and they have made big commitments. So again, Biden talks about the 4 crises of the pandemic, the economy, racial injustice, and climate. And we think that's a really important way to approach our work, that we advance climate solutions, that we create good family sustaining jobs and focus on workers and communities affected by the energy transition, that we prioritize justice and equity for low-income communities and the communities of color that are disproportionately harmed both by toxic pollution for decades and also by the climate crisis. There's talk, which people are probably familiar with, of a focus on standards, investment, and justice. And we think that's a really smart way of thinking about all of this. So most important, the Biden administration really does need to bring a whole of government approach to the climate crisis, bringing in, of course, the obvious departments and agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, Department of Interior, but also State Department, Commerce, Treasury, so many more. So we want there to be a clear structure in the White House and CEQ. There's different theories about that. I think exactly how they structure it, we defer to them, but it just needs to be clear that they are centering and coordinating ambitious action on climate and environmental justice across the agencies, that there are strong staff in place on day one to do that. So again, it's going to be much harder to get progressive leaders confirmed if it's a majority leader, McConnell. So we may be looking at a number of senior officials operating in acting capacity. I think definitely there is an ongoing need for great staff who can start without waiting for a Senate confirmation. So to the extent that you know people, we're very focused on ensuring, as is the transition team, ensuring diversity in all ways. Of course, first and foremost, racial diversity, but also range of experiences, geography, gender, LGBTQ. So if you know of great people, or if you yourself are interested, there will be, I think the Trump refusing to concede has slowed things down a little bit, but there should be a portal soon, or I'm happy to talk to anybody on the side. So Biden's Build Back Better agenda that I referenced commits to a $2 trillion investment in clean energy and climate solutions and environmental justice. That number is going to be hard to achieve if it's divided government. But he has committed to going really big on clean energy infrastructure, on the power sector, transportation, buildings, housing, appliances, agriculture, and much more. He's already said he's going to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, and that he's going to reassert our leadership on the world stage. That he's going to get rid of fossil fuel subsidies. Again, some of this is a little bit trickier to do without an act of Congress. We're also urging him to make our public lands and waters a big part of the climate solution, to apply a climate test to all new fossil fuel infrastructure, and to reject any permits that are inconsistent with that. So of course, they should quickly protect the Arctic refuge. They should reject the dirty and dangerous Keystone XL and Dakota Access pipelines. They should shut down any new offshore drilling. There's also a real need and an opportunity to do major enforcement for polluters through EPA and Department of Justice. So there's a lot more in the executive space, and certainly would love to hear people's thoughts. But I think one thing is really important with all of this is that the Biden-Harris immediately use the key moments to come to make clear what a priority this is, whether it's this ongoing period over these next 70 days during the transition and their public comments. Obviously, everyone is extremely focused on COVID appropriately, but I think there's still opportunities, again, to make the connection and also to talk about their leadership on climate as they have been doing. There's the inauguration, there's day one priorities, there's what gets accomplished in the first 100 days, there's the State of the Union, budget proposal. So we have extremely high hopes, and it is, to wake up and just feel relief. The Trump's days are numbered is really a feeling that I'm sure you all share. So I'm just going to talk briefly about legislative opportunities, and then I'll turn back to Beth. So it's clear there might be some activity during this lame duck period on COVID relief. Again, McConnell is already trying to keep that as narrow as possible. Either way, we are absolutely going to need to push for a big, green, and just economic recovery package very early next year. We need to invest in clean energy manufacturing, in infrastructure and deployment. We think it's really important that as part of any economic recovery package that the Democrats extend and expand clean energy tax credits for wind, solar, efficiency, and electric vehicles. That has some support, some bipartisan support, including from Senator Collins and other Senate Republicans. We definitely can put people back to work doing things like cleaning up the orphaned and abandoned oil and gas wells and lots more. So again, we're expecting McConnell will stand in the way of progress at every opportunity if he remains majority leader. He's certainly going to try to drag out the nominations process, maybe even try to block some, although people like Lindsey Graham did say, oh, that Biden is entitled to have a cabinet. So we will work to drag the Senate along. And again, I do think there are Republicans who could potentially be gettable. There are, in addition to the economic recovery package or packages, there are the appropriations bills. There's going to be a transportation bill, a Water Resources Development Act bill. So I will say that I like our odds of being able to make legislative progress in addition to all of this executive action, significantly more when we have a Biden-Harris administration and a Speaker Pelosi than when it was Speaker Pelosi sort of fighting on her own. So of course, I guess I'll just stop by again noting that if we are able to prevail in Georgia, that will give us a much bigger opportunity in terms of legislative action. But again, thank you all for everything that you do, and thanks for the chance to visit with you today.
Tiernan, that's so great. And we've already had some questions come in, but I'm going to hold them and let Beth take us to the state level, and then we'll do Q&A on everything next. So Beth, you've got the floor.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, my unmute was not working. So, but here we go. Thank you so much, Tiernan. That is, it's so positive what's happening on the federal level on so many levels. So we're hoping that, some of that will trickle down. Some of the executive order monies, maybe even. Is there any money that you think can come to Maine to help us fight climate? Because our budget is really hurting. Oh, she can't unmute either.
Chess, I think you have to oh, there we go.
Okay, there we go. So I definitely, there is opportunity for, even without congressional action, and we're still figuring out exactly how this would work, but we do intend for the Biden administration, again, $2 trillion, probably unlikely, but at the same time, that's a massive amount of money. And could you get halfway there through federal authorities and marshaling resources through different agencies and departments, and then have that then flow to states to do implementation, job creation, all of that. I think there's huge opportunity and something that we're looking forward to working with you all on, because obviously you guys do such great work.
Great, thank you. So let's talk about what's going on at the state level. Our composition there's some similarities to the feds. So we now have, can I have the next slide, please, Jess? So we now have 22 Democrats in the Senate and 13 Republicans. That's a pickup for the Dems and a loss for the Republicans. Notably, the the minority leader, Dana Dow, lost to a young climate activist, Chloe Maxman, who had served in the House for 2 years and then ran for the Senate and won. So that's pretty exciting. Dana Dow had served for a long time and, you know, owns a mattress business in Waldoboro, and he was defeated. So that was a really a significant victory for climate, I think. And in the House, we have 80 Democrats now. There were 89 and 67 Republicans. So similar to the U.S. Congress, we've lost some seats in the House, but we still have a significant majority. There used to be 6 independents, and now there are only 4. So, you know, some of those losses that we had were really strong environmentalists, and we're gonna miss them. Tina Riley is just one I have to talk about. Henry Ingerson is another one. Really, really big champions for us, and their losses is going to be felt. But, and you know, we have like Biden, we have pro-climate Governor Janet Mills, who is, you know, getting ready to release the Climate Action Plan on December 1st. The Climate Council just finalized that, except for the crossing the T's and dotting the I's. So that'll be released on December 1st. So what this means for environmental legislation is the Senate's going to be a breeze. Most of those Republicans are moderate climate supporting Republicans. It's a wonderful chamber. The House is really divided ideologically. The Democrats are all pro-climate, and the Republicans, for the most part, aren't, which is very sad. And they've just elected leadership that seems more conservative and more anti-climate change action than it was, which is even hard to imagine. So, and I always use this example. The Senate in 2019 unanimously voted in the biggest clean energy bill, a renewable portfolio standard, unanimously. And in the House, it got 1 vote from the Republicans. So that just shows you the different mindset between the House and the Senate. So here's the leadership that was finalized last night by the Democratic House Caucus. This is called the Ledge Council. So leadership is these people, these 10 people are going to decide how business is conducted this legislative session, which is going to be, you know, unique. There are a lot of things where it's probably going to be remote. It's probably going to be all committee meeting until late April or May. And how to let the public have meaningful access to the legislative process is really unknown at this time. Hopefully we'll know more next week. I'm sure the 10 of them are figuring out a plan right now. So there you have it. The Jeff Timberlake in the Senate side, Jeff Timberlake was the assistant to Dana Dow last year. He's now the minority leader. Matt Pouliot is the only new leader on the Senate side. That's the Senate Dems, that's exactly the same. And on the House side, Ryan Fecteau got elevated from majority leader to speaker. Michelle Dunphy is new as the majority leader. Rachel Talbot Ross is the assistant majority leader. And speaking about diversity, I believe that she's the first Black person to serve in leadership. Certainly the first Black woman. Kathleen Dillingham was the leader last year for the Republicans, and Joel Stetkis, who is, you know, has a 0 on our scorecard, is the assistant minority leader. And, you know, they're proud of the zeros, Kathleen Dillingham and Joel Stetkis. So that is really disappointing. Next slide, please. So the legislature is going to be sworn in on December 2nd, and they're also going to elect the constitutional officers. And, you know, the Secretary of State, there's big focus on the 6 people are running for that, all ex-legislators. And it is a big popularity contest, 151 reps, 35 Senate members all vote. So we'll see what happens there. You know, one of the big things that we have been pushing at Maine Conservation Alliance and Maine Conservation Voters is vote by mail and absentee voting. And I'm pleased to say we worked with a big coalition of quote unquote democracy organizations, and we wanted there to be 70% absentee voting during the primary and the general, and we came really close to that. There were where's my list? We had 507,000 people vote absentee in this state, and it's like 837,000. Of course, I can't find the number exactly, overall votes. So that was 63% of Maine voters voted absentee, which I think is pretty extraordinary, broke all records. And we, like the country, voted, broke all records for voter participation. So that's pretty exciting. And we're having a forum for the Secretary of State next Tuesday to hear what these 6 people have to say. And there are a lot of reforms that we need in the Secretary of State's office, and we think that drop boxes are here to stay. That was a really good addition this year. But we also need to actually have automatic voter registration. 40 states have it, and we are one of the 10 that don't. And it's time for us to join to really upgrade our IT to let us be able to do that. So that is what's going to happen on December 2nd. And again, I think they're going to decide quickly how the legislature will run. What's the next slide? Can you please move that, Jess? So I think I'm going to stop talking right now so that you can all ask questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Beth. And actually, before we get to the Q&A.
Sorry. I forgot to talk about the biggest thing. So not the biggest thing, but as far as legislation, what we're looking at, so there's a lot of things that were left undecided last year. The legislature just adjourned, and there were a lot of things left. And so a lot of our environmental priorities will be reintroduced. And the governor will also on December 1st likely talk about buckets of legislation that are related to the climate action plan. And that will involve a transportation bill, a sea level rise bill, a bill on buildings, a clean energy bill. So stay tuned. We don't exactly know what those bills look like, but they will be, she's going to focus on the clean energy economy and, paint this plan as a way to jumpstart the economy while we're building, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So I just wanted to say that it's going to be an exciting legislative session in terms of bills. So thank you.
Thanks, Beth. I know we're really excited to see that final climate action plan on December 1st, and then to get into the real work of implementing it. Before we open up the floor for questions, Chess, will you go back to that Secretary of State slide again? That we are running a forum with a whole slew of partners on Tuesday evening, and later this afternoon we'll send out a recording of this event with a link to register for the Secretary of State forum. So definitely weigh in or register and then weigh in and let us know what you think. It's pretty exciting to have an avenue to participate in this process, given that it's our lawmakers who will actually cast the ballots for these folks. But I know we can count on the team MCV to have some opinions about who we'd like to see in these offices. All right, let's go to the Q&A and actually, so let me start with this. Tiernan, you mentioned that the Georgia runoff elections. And we certainly know that there's so much of what the Biden administration can accomplish really hinges on the outcome of those elections. What can MCV and our supporters be doing right now to help strengthen the Ossoff and Warnock campaigns?
Thank you so much for asking. I would say a couple of different things. One, I will try to post in the chat actually the website on Give Green, which I mentioned is our partnership with NRDC, Action Fund, PAC, and with Next Gen America for people to make contributions to both of them. That's enormously helpful. This is going to be such an expensive race, and I think they're already, probably a number of you have probably already contributed, so thank you. But if you want to encourage your friends or family members to do so as well, that would be great. And then we do something called Green Roots, which is part of a green wave with a bunch of other environmental groups that includes the Sierra Club, National Wildlife Federation, NRDC Action Fund again, and Environmental Defense Fund Action. So the C4s of several of our partner environmental organizations to recruit our members. This is on the coordinated side to make phone calls, to write letters. Many of you probably participated in letter writing through Vote Forward, to send texts, so people can definitely sign up. I see Rob Warner on. Rob, maybe, I don't know if there's anything you want to add about that, but definitely like being a volunteer would be great. I think those are the two big things. I lead our coordinated electoral work, so it's possible that LCV will be doing work on the independent expenditure side that I would find out about when it's public. But definitely this is so important. So thank you all for anything that you're able to do.
Thanks, that's really helpful. Tiernan, both you at the federal level and Beth, you talked about this for the state level. There's a lot of climate forward work that we can look forward to in 2021, which is so exciting. I'm guessing that most of us on this call today know a lot about that work. But there are a lot of people, both in the state and around the country, for whom it's going to be new. What kind of public engagement or education strategies are you all thinking about to reach the general public and really get that public support behind the ambitious climate work that we need to do?
Beth, do you want to go first, or should I jump?
No, you go first, Tiernan, and I'll follow.
Okay. Well, I think we have been so encouraged, you know, I think this is not just LCV or MCV, but just the sort of explosion of people wanting to engage in the democratic process to make sure that we can all participate equitably, that we can raise our voices. Clearly the in-person enormous protests early on of the Trump administration, but that, you know, that energy continued. It was certainly helped propel people, I think, like Jared Golden to victory in 2018. And again, this year, thank goodness, we're really glad to have him returning. But I think while a lot of the work is virtual now, I think the letter writing and the partnership that we had with Vote Forward, and that I think was so impactful. So I think we need to continue that through. We have, you know, again, gotten rid of the most anti-environmental president ever, but clearly, given that both the House and the Senate are extremely narrowly divided, I think as we move toward both, you know, keeping, and I think that I really do think that President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris care deeply about these issues. But I think they also are going to have so many competing priorities. Again, I think focusing on it in the intersectional, solution-oriented economic recovery way that we've been discussing, I think is both the right thing to do and the smart thing to do. But I think absolutely people across the state of Maine and across the country continuing to weigh in with their elected officials in whatever way is safe, you know, whether sort of socially distant and masked outside or writing letters, making phone calls, sending texts, again, so contributing to candidates who share our mission. I think all of that is so important. And I think to the extent that, you know, people are sort of starting to spend more time at home again, I really think like using that time to communicate with elected officials is such a good way of spending that time.
I totally agree. And I'll just say that, you know, I always let people know this, that legislators here say to me, if I hear from 3 or 4 constituents, and those are the only people they want to hear from, they don't want to hear from those that they don't represent. And they say that that is a lot. So yes, having that interaction with electeds is really important. The other thing I think is, and I think you asked this, Kathleen, about the messaging. So, you know, it is the Joe Biden's plan and Kamala Harris's plan. It is a clean energy jobs creation plan, right? The largest sector for job growth was clean energy jobs, and that's happening in Maine too. So the opportunity is great. I think people, you know, get really beaten down by how awful the crises that we have, that are the climate and the health crises that are intermingled here, but offering up solutions that we have at our disposal with clean energy, with solar and offshore wind, particularly in the state of Maine, as well as some hydro. I think that there's it can be excitement there. And I think that that's how the governor's gonna pitch this. But I think we can build support for climate solutions when we talk about how we're actually can bail ourselves out of this this economic crisis that we have in Maine using our clean energy economy, our transition to our clean energy economy. So, you know, even hiring people to do weatherization, you know, on the efficiency side, there's so much potential here. And I think that that's a really way, I think the more we can message positively what this climate action plan can do, I think the more success we'll have.
I totally agree with that. And then just specifically in terms of thinking about Senator Collins, like I suspect that I will not be welcome in her office anytime soon, given our support for Sarah Gideon. But she does have a really important role to play going forward, given how narrowly divided the Senate is. So for those of you who still are able to still have relationships with her, I think urging her to work across the aisle and to, you know, think about some of these areas for bipartisan support. Like, I think we need to look for every opportunity to make progress. And, you know, I also think given how narrowly divided the House is going to be, and Jared Golden being in, you know, a more conservative district and in some way, and having a more conservative record than some Democrats, I think he also will have a real opportunity to sort of get his perspective out there. And I think figuring out like what are the best things to get him to champion on the clean energy jobs, economic recovery side, I think is important.
Can you please tell us, Tiernan, I don't remember right now, but Jared Golden, can you tell us his score, his LCV score? It was pretty high.
It was, I think, let me check.
It was at least 90. So I was happy to hear that, because
I was thinking it was 94 or 97. I can,
yeah, which is great. So even though he often doesn't stick his neck out because of his district, I think, you know, it's nice to know that he still is a really strong conservation voter.
Definitely.
And we've been talking to, just so you all know, we've been talking to him about polluter pays. You know, that's something that's happening across the country, that the fossil fuel industry takes responsibility for paying for, you know, much like what happened with the tobacco industry, that they take responsibility and pay for the damage that they knew they were causing. And our friend Sean Mahoney knows a lot about that. He's on the call.
He did get a 97%, which is excellent. I would also note that because many of the Republicans, especially on the House side, are so extreme and so radical, there were a lot of 97s, a good number of hundreds too. So I think it's good to continue to have discussion and dialogue, and also to get him sort of leading on particular issues, like as you guys are doing.
Yeah, and I just, you know, we often overlook her because she's just does the right thing all the time. She's perfect. Is Congressman Shelley Pingree is just, you know, what a champion that we have from Maine for climate. She's the model. Can we just clone her? That would be fabulous.
I wish. I was thinking more about the sort of like more like swingy aspects of the Maine delegation, but let's talk about Congresswoman Pingree for a second, and then also let's talk about Senator King. But is she, and I think especially given the focus on sort of the increasing recognition of the importance of agriculture and nature-based solutions, she's such a long-standing champion and has such an important role to play going forward. And I think especially now, having been in the House for many years, like just such a senior leader. So Maine is lucky to be represented by her.
So lucky, yeah.
And then there was, I saw in the news this morning some rumors that Shelley Pingree may be in the running or on the short list for Secretary of Agriculture. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that. And we're like really not speculating about particular, but I do think I think she's amazing, and that she would be an incredible Secretary of Agriculture. And that would be great for me.
One of those really mixed, I have very mixed feelings about it, because I absolutely love being represented by her in Congress. So
yeah,
well, whatever's
that's
for
where the cloning comes in, right?
And then Senator King, of course, I'll never forget when Maine Conservation Voters was so lovely to host all of the partner state LCV organizations from across the country when he was first running for Senate. And he came and gave some remarks, and he had which I've since learned, the pocket card of
the hockey stick, yes,
emissions, which he carries around with him, but it's been fantastic having him in the Senate. We were really happy that he was so overwhelmingly reelected. And again, I think he is such an important voice for, and so much expertise when it comes to conservation and clean energy, and obviously his deep passion for climate. He wears on his shoulder, in addition to giving out the palm cards. Getting to see all of your delegation in person. It's not the same doing this job remotely, I have to say.
Exactly.
You both have mentioned the COVID pandemic, which warrants a mention in every conversation we have, right? And I know has slowed some of the progress that we need to be making on, or at least complicated the progress that we need to make on climate. Beth, at the state level, I know one of the things that was impacted by that was the statewide plastic bag ban. Could you just give us an update on what we thought was going to happen and what's happening now?
So that was, initially, I think when COVID first hit, people were saying, oh my God, we have got to use plastic because that's going to help make us safer and got to keep our food safer. So we've got to use plastic, and we weren't allowed to use reusable bags initially. So what the governor did is push the implementation date of that bill until January of 2021. So that takes effect. The single-use plastic bag ban takes effect in January of 2021.
So we're almost there, and
we're almost there.
At least where I'm shopping, we're allowed to have our reusable bags again,
yes,
right? So
and we can reuse our bags again. So at least right now, right?
Yeah. We talked a little bit too about the climate action plan and some of the initiatives that are in the works for the state level. Just one more time, what's our prospect of federal funding to help us implement those? Any ideas?
I think there could definitely be some, we expect and we'll certainly be advocating for grants coming to states for a lot of clean energy work and focus.
Good.
And definitely to the extent that people have thoughts or particular expertise or points that you want us making as your friends in DC, please keep us posted. I'm sure you won't be shy because you guys.
Yeah, we won't be shy. And what we've heard, the governor has indicated that she will use bonding to actualize the climate action plan as much as she can, and that the budgets, the general funds is pretty much off limits. However, you need 2/3 of the legislature to pass a bond, and last year the House Republicans were just anti-bond except for the transportation bond, and it's going to be a heavy lift to get them on board with any bonds this year. So that's disappointing, but who knows, maybe if it's they really understand the importance of the infrastructure that's needed to rebuild this economy that's related to clean energy, maybe they can be persuaded. But I would just want to say that it's an uphill battle. That's why we need federal funds.
Right. We've talked a lot about climate, which makes a ton of sense, but that's not the only issue that has become that we're looking at a whole new world in. What about water protection, for example? What are we looking at the state level and the federal level in terms of water quality and river connection? What should we expect?
Should I go first, or do you want to, Beth?
Sure.
So, as I've said repeatedly, like Trump is the most anti-environmental president ever, and the attacks on the clean water rule and our water more broadly are really horrific. And then he has the audacity to go out there and talk about how he's done more for our environment than anyone, and how much he wants crystal clear water. It's really disgusting. So there's a huge need. There's the immediate sort of COVID economic crisis related needing to ensure that all people in this country have access to clean water, regardless of their zip code. So that is really important in terms of like immediate, even sort of potentially this short term, if there's a next COVID relief bill in this lame duck. But then there's so much to do in terms of overturning stopping the Bush rollbacks of the Clean Water Rule. Clearly, PFAS is a huge and growing issue around the country. So we need to take executive action. We've sort of made some modest progress at the federal legislative level. We keep thinking we're closer to a big win on that because there is a fair amount of bipartisan concern and support for PFAS progress. And then it always falls short of what the need and what the expectations are. So there's a lot to do going forward, both executively through executive action and on the legislative side.
And yeah, a lot of, exactly, just ditto. But the other thing that I wanted to add is overboard discharge. You know, we have a lot of our sewage treatment plants who dump into our oceans or our rivers when there is you know, high water events. And, you know, there's always a backlog. I think, you know, millions of dollars, I think billions of dollars to upgrade those plants or replace them. And then there's the added, you know, many of them sit at sea level. So they're going to have to be moved, right? If we continue on the course that we're on with sea level rise. So what's going to happen again? That's, you know, that's all about money. So again, we hope that that we get trickled upon by the federal government. But, you know, I also hope that legislators understand how important it is to keep putting money into the clean water infrastructure, namely wastewater treatment plants.
Tiernan, to your point about getting rid of the most anti-environment president we've seen, once we start talking about the things that we can be hopeful about, it's like they just keep coming, right? So like clean water, that's a thing again. What about the Arctic? Are we cool on the Arctic? Are we drilling in the Arctic? What do we need to worry about? Or what do we not have to worry about anymore?
So, I mean, definitely there are day one things that, you know, we don't think should be a heavy lift, like president, the day he becomes president, he should obviously, again, things like getting back in Paris and starting to reassert our leadership on the world stage. We hope and expect that they will immediately, when it comes to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, pause any oil and gas activities from moving forward. And then this, obviously, it should include canceling any scheduled leases or denying any new leases, suspending any permitting. And then we'd, of course, you know, we had made a push to get more permanent protection. This is actually, the Arctic Refuge was the thing that I sent my first postcard to my member of Congress when I was in high school about, and losing this fight was both part of the reason that we were so disappointed in Senator Collins, which happened in very close proximity to her vote for Brett Kavanaugh, but in the fall of 2017, when the Republicans snuck it through the budget reconciliation process. But that fight has been something that I feel like has been such a priority for a lot of people throughout our careers. I think it's really important from not just an environmental perspective or this iconic place, but obviously there are Indigenous people who rely on the Arctic Refuge. There are an incredible array of wildlife. So we're both feeling a sense of relief for places like the Arctic, and hoping that will be day one in terms of the immediate steps, but then also longer term, we'd love to have permanent protection for the Arctic Refuge.
Thank you. That's great. That's all great to hear. I know that we do have a little bit of a stretch before President-elect Biden becomes President Biden. Is there anything we need to worry about for the lame duck session? What's on your radar for the next couple of weeks?
I mean, I would sort of say like the very state of our country and democracy, what he's doing right now is terrifying. Yeah, just that. I mean, I think it's encouraging to see some Republicans, you know, long overdue, but start to say that, of course, that Biden and that the transition team needs to be getting briefings, you know, like, so I think there's sort of, what does this mean for our future of our country and our security and all of that? In terms of more rollbacks, I mean, he's done some really bizarre things, like the chair of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, was someone named Neil Chatterjee, who was a longtime environmental advisor to Senator McConnell, like certainly not somebody who's particularly, not like a, not the most environmental person. He's actually a very good guy, I know him. But he, over the last couple of years, had started talking more about climate change is real, we need to do something about it. He expressed support for potentially doing some sort of carbon pricing, which, you know, for our perspective, could be part of like a tool. We don't think it's the be all end all. We're really focused on the major investment on focus in environmental justice communities and a just transition for workers, and ambitious target reductions and standards to get there. So again, that could be part of it. But the fact that he sort of expressed even some modest support for carbon pricing, that got him fired from his job as the chair of FERC. He's now serving out the rest of his term as a member of it. But he also fired the person who was in charge of the National Climate Assessment. So he's doing some really bizarre things on the staffing side. Of course, people know it's been widely documented, more than 100 rollbacks of common sense, public health, and environmental protections. So there's so much of what they're trying to do they've already done. There's a bit more I think that they could do. But I think for me, the thing that I wake up and feeling scared about in the middle of the night is just, what does this mean sort of overall for our country, and when will he actually sort of like acknowledge the reality of what's happening?
Yeah, well, that's keeping me up in the middle of the night too. So, and I have a feeling a lot of us on this call, but we'll think about what's to come in January and the great work that's already happening here at the state level. Beth, what are you most excited about as you think about the 2021 session?
I'm really excited to pass the bills that were on the brink of passing last year. A lot of really good environmental priorities related to PFAS and to energy efficiency. So that's what I'm excited about. And hopefully there'll be a streamlined process for those. And as well as the, implementing the climate action plan, which I think will have significant legislative action to make it happen, but also agency action, right? Working with the agencies to help move along the things that don't need legislation. So it's sort of aside to the legislative session, but those are the things that I'm most excited about.
Love it, love it. Tiernan, what about you? What are you most excited about as we start to close the book? It's on 2020.
I'm excited about so much. I mean, I think just to have a president-elect and a vice president-elect who are going to be respectful of science, who are going to listen to experts, who ran on solutions, to all of these crises, and they ran on them, they won on them, they are already during this transition period. I think just bringing some comfort and maturity to a country that obviously needs it so badly. And then I think the chance to, really help as grim and awful as things are, to think about what's possible, to help our economy recover in a way that is more just and equitable and creates good paying jobs and focuses on environmental justice. Like it's such a sea change from everything that we have been experiencing. And I think it's just so exciting to contemplate. And I think, being on this call with all of you and how much people care and want to be we're a part of the solutions of getting to this point, and all the work that we have to do. It is daunting. I mean, there's a lot to do during the transition to be ready to go right away. I'm also excited about the prospect of potentially helping Warnock and Ossoff win in Georgia. So thank you for posting the Give Green link for people who would like to. You can give either to both of them, and there's a Georgia sort of joint fund. You can give to either of them, however you want to do it, but that link is there. Feel free to spread it around to any of your contacts.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, for those of you who were concerned that you were going to go into election season withdrawal after November 3rd, never fear. There's those runoff elections and our Secretary of State and other constitutional officers being elected. It just never ends. Tiernan and Beth, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone else, thank you for being here. It feels really good to look at the election results and think about what's ahead, and to know that we've got such great partners as we begin that work. Jess, would you put up that last slide?
And I just want to say thank you all too for being here. And to Tiernan, really wonderful words of wisdom. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. And I see some longtime friends and colleagues on this Zoom. So thank you all for everything that you do. Look forward to making progress together in the weeks and months ahead.
Absolutely. And if you really enjoy these climate policy conversations, definitely mark your calendars for next week. Next Friday at noon, we will be digging into what happens when climate change forces people to leave their homes forever. So what does current refugee law and immigration policy have to say about it? What can we expect in Maine? We'll be joined by Anna Welch, who is the Sam L. Cohen Refugee and Human Rights Clinical Professor at the University of Maine School of Law, and one of her students, Kyle Lanabaugh. And look forward to seeing you all. You will get an email later this afternoon with links to sign up for the Secretary of State Forum and a survey about today's program. As always, thank you for joining us. And again, a huge thanks to Tiernan and Beth. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Take care.
Bye, y'all.